I get just a little closer, maybe? I can read. That's not good.
Oh, this is where we ended up with that. How do we get the volume down thing? Did we ever figure that out? Oh, I know. We just paused this one because it's the viewer, not the. And how do I get back to this?
So my volume off is out here, but they'd be able to hear us?
Because they're hearing from this device, and now I'm going to just double check that by going on to live. I'm not in the view yet. I'm
moving it closer just because I don't know how the volume is going to be, how much. And it zooms in and out, so it doesn't need to be so far away.
All right, beautiful.
Okay,
So now,
we're still working out.
Yeah.
Anyone out there in YouTube land? And
what it's going to do now is it's going to flip around to who's speaking.
Okay, all right. Is it that was okay?
So,
why don't you say something? This is Aya Adimuti, and this is Aya Yanika, and I'm Aya Sivijana.
Yep. Okay. That was just the sound check.
And we're doing sound checks. So please excuse, we're still working without our devices. If you're out in YouTube land.
Okay. Now I'm going to mute this.
All right. So now we're about to start our reflection. We have the Dvedhāvitakkasutta, which is translated as two kinds of thought. And it's a very powerful sutta. Aya Adimuti suggested that we look at the sutta today. And it's very useful. It doesn't matter how many times you've read the sutta, how many times you reflected on the sutta, there's still, I'm sure there'll be something that you find of value in the sutta. I think the rereading and reflecting on different aspects of the teachings in the sutta is really important for progress on the path. So I'm going to share this on the screen, and then Nyanika and I will take turns reading, and then Adi Muti, if she would be happy, will add some comments and reflections on the sutta. So how do we get these? So can we put that on the side? Change that one, that view.
Well, you're not going to try to read. They can see the whole thing.
They can see it. Okay, yeah. That's irrelevant.
That's the important detail.
Okay. So we can start with Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammam Sangham Namasami. So I'll start reading. just want to check to see if the translator is activated. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Sawati in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There, the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants? Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: Mendicants, before my awakening, when I was still an unawakened, but intent on awakening, I thought, why don't I meditate by continually dividing my thoughts into two classes? So I just wanted to emphasize here, he was saying before his awakening, he had this idea that he would divide his thoughts into two classes. So he was striving for awakening. This is a bodhisattva sewa. The Buddha before his awakening is how they translate it here. Aspiring to becoming a Buddha. And is there anything dramatically different in your translation there? This is Bhante Sujato's translation. And if you want to look up online, you look up MN.19.
Yeah, the other translations are very similar.
Translations. And does he say still no?
Unenlightened bodhisattva and unenlightened bodhisattva.
So here, in this context, though, it's a different meaning than the Mahayana's concept of bodhisattva, but it's bodhisattva. The Sanskrit would be sattva. Do you have anything to add to this so far? So I assigned sensual, malicious, and cruel thoughts to one class. And I assigned thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness to the second class. So this is Vitakka's thought in this context. And then karma vitakka, sensual thoughts. Yapada vitakka is a cruel, malicious, that's ill will. And hingsa is harmful, cruel thoughts. And then he has nekama vitakka, which is thoughts of renunciation. Abhyapada vitakka is a goodwill, and ahimsa is harmlessness. And that's the second class. As I meditated, diligent, keen, and resolute, a sensual thought arose. I understood. This sensual thought has arisen in me. It leads to hurting myself, hurting others, or hurting both. It blocks wisdom. It's on the side of anguish, and it doesn't lead to extinguishment. So he was seeing the rising of these different kinds of thoughts in his mind, and he saw the harm in them for himself and others, and potentially both. So I think of it as internally, you can see the harm if you're angry or you have thoughts of cruelty. You feel the feeling inside is really painful. Actually, it's uncomfortable. It's icky. But if I spoke or acted out, then that's potentially harmful to others, and then potentially harming both. Do you want to read the Bhante Bodhi's translation of what we just read?
I have, sure, I'll go down. I abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. Apart the thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus: this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana. Bhante Siddhaso, that last line, it destroys wisdom, brings irritation, and does not lead to nibbana.
So first we recognize within ourselves what's going on, and then we see the potential of what's going on in our minds, what possibly can result from that. When I reflected that it leads to hurting myself, it went away. Or the thought went away. When I reflected it leads to hurting others, it went away. When I reflected that it leads to hurting both, it went away. This gacchati moves, wanders, and this is a going away. This is a disappearance.
Yeah, and Bhante Bodhi just calls it subsided.
Subside.
So it may not completely vanish when we look at the word gacchati. It doesn't necessarily mean it's completely gone away. It's wandering, it's disappearing. Abhattam is the part that's the disappearance.
So it's not forcing the thoughts away, it's reflecting on them, seeing their harm, and then that kind of diffuses them. I would see it as diffusing, and then more we do this, the less of a habit it is for us. When I reflected that it leads to hurting both, it went away. When I reflected that it blocks wisdom, it's on the side of anguish, and it doesn't lead to extinguishment, it went away. And to Panya Nirodha, obstructs wisdom. Vigattapakiko is a troublesome afflicted. Ananibbana samvattaniko. It's not leading to putting out the fire, not conducive to nibbana.
So nothing
worth.
I think for the most part, when I went through the different translations, they're not dramatically different. The vocab words here are mostly clear.
So I think meditated, what was it? Viharto. And that's abiding. Does he say abiding? As I abided or something like that?
As I abided thus.
Yeah, as I abided thus.
Yeah, abiding in this way.
Yeah, it's a little bit poetic. Then, as I meditated, diligent, keen, and resolute, a malicious thought arose.
I don't like the translation meditated because it restricts. We too often think of meditation as being on the cushion. And this is a practice to do are abiding in our continual movement throughout our entire practice day.
I agree. Yeah, that's why I was, pointing out this viharito.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, thank you. So abiding, could be in any position, any posture throughout the day. I could be washing the dishes and start remembering something that mean somebody said to me, and I start feeling mean myself. Which, is this helpful? No. Is it harmful? Yes. So a cruel thought arose. I understood this cruel thought has arisen in me. It leads to hurting myself, hurting others, and hurting both. It blocks wisdom. It's on the side of anguish, and it doesn't lead to extinguishment. And it goes through the same process. When I reflected that it leads to hurting myself, hurting others, hurting both, it went away. When I reflected that it blocks wisdom, it's on the side of anguish, and it doesn't lead to extinguishment, it went away. But then he's getting more proactive here, it sounds like. So I gave up, got rid of, and eliminated any cruel thoughts that arose in me. Or it may be that it's just during this process. What do you think? Is he getting more active to get rid of them? You chose the sutta for a while. So I was just wondering.
We're going to get to that part.
You let us know. Okay. Stop me if there's something that you want to make a comment on or think I'm way off base or something. But how does Bhante Bodhi translate that?
I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. And
does it sound like you finally got fed up with it and you said, I'm just gonna.
Well, that's definitely happened in me, where it's like, oh my goodness, this afflictive condition that I just keep putting myself in when I go down that rabbit hole. I just got to be done with this. It's like the taste gets bad enough that you go drink from something different.
You see the same thing going on over and over and over again. You just say, enough. But I think this is it's in a kind way to oneself.
It's ideally in a kind way. It's more effective in a kind way.
Yeah, I think that has to be.
Otherwise,
or it's just you see it again and again and again, and it's just really. It could be the disgust, the nibbida towards it. It's like, in this case, you see it on a superficial level again and again and again, and maybe then you're digging deeper at the causes. Perhaps. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the next sutta goes into all of this, right? So this is just an abbreviation. So if you see a thought coming again and again, then there's like a step-by-step process of how to relate to that. So generally, like it says in the beginning, if you look at a thought, then it just vanishes. Yep. We all have that experience, but then there's some thoughts that don't just vanish because there's some kind of process, somehow we're identified with it, or that's something that's obsessing us, and then there's a series of steps. So if it doesn't just vanish, then you say, well, like he is there, right? This is kind of an abbreviated sutta. This is not good, this is bringing harm to me and others. You see the downside of that, and then the other steps are you just ignore it. If that doesn't work, then you investigate, right? The sense of self or whatever, and then finally the fifth step is just no. But that no it's just from a place of clarity, like there's just no point. And so there's a place to be very strong, but that place is after all the other steps. And then there's just a wisdom that is just like, well, no. like a child going out on the street or whatever. It's just
Right.
it's dangerous, so you pull it back. And so there can be a lot of strength there, a lot of clarity there, but there doesn't need to be aversion with that strength and discipline. Doesn't necessarily have to be particularly kind. It's just like clear. It's just, this is a waste of time. And I think something in the sutta, I mean, I was going to say a few comments later, but something in the sutta, it's clear that, well, one thing is it's the first step of practice, right? To step back and start to understand the patterns of the mind rather than being immersed in them. So just starting to understand, starting to see, starting to look at it. And really implicit in this, or explicit, is just the idea that our thoughts are really important and we really have to notice them. I mean, it took me a long time, actually, because you kind of think your mental world is your private world, and what we think, what we fantasize, it doesn't really matter. But it does, partly because we can just waste a lot of time, we can waste a lot of energy with thinking that can obstruct our deeper practice, even if the thoughts aren't that bad. But also, well, anyway, we'll come to that later, but we're conditioning our minds, which also conditions our behavior. And so the thoughts are like, what are the patterns that are going to give rise ultimately to speech and to action? So this is really the message here, that thoughts are to be taken seriously. And we really have to notice, and we really have to be disciplined. So just like we discipline with what we speak, we also need to be very disciplined with what we think. Is it making us happy or unhappy? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. So this is moving into really important reflection here. Whatever a mendicant, whatever anybody frequently thinks about and considers becomes their heart's inclination. Back to what you're saying. If they often think about and consider sensual thoughts, they've given up the thought of renunciation to cultivate sensual thought. Their mind inclines to sensual thoughts. If they often think about and consider malicious thoughts, their mind inclines to malicious thoughts. And then they've given up metta, they've given up kind thoughts. If they often think about and consider cruel thoughts, their mind inclines to cruel thoughts.
Yeah, so a huge highlight there, right? Which is just that whatever we rest our mind on, whatever's going around in our mind actually becomes us. So we really need to be careful, because if we think a lot about things that are beautiful, things that are loving, then also that goes into our mind. And well, now with neuroscience, right, whatever we think about actually leaves traces in the mind. So this is very clearly spelled out here, but it actually happens on a physical level. And so whatever we want to become, we have to be careful what we rest our minds on, because that is what we are becoming. And so that's why it's just so fundamentally important. And also, of course, like the defilements have quite a strong pull. And so that's why these kinds of suttas, because it takes a deliberate effort to cultivate what's wholesome and pull our mind away from what is unwholesome. So it's a like steady practice. So maybe this the other thing, I could say this at any time, but like on the one hand, we do this kind of moment by moment. So we notice what's arising and make those adjustments. But the other thing is we notice the inclination of our minds. So we all have our particular defilements. So some people are kind of anger types, and they tend to dwell on kind of, anger thoughts. Some people are sensual desire types, and they find themselves thinking a lot about, I don't know, possessions they might like, or nice food they might like to eat, or whatever. And that naturally obsesses the mind. And so by looking at the kind of patterns of the mind, then we can, over time, kind of counter that. So, of course, in the Buddhist teachings, if we find we're a kind of anger or hate type, then practicing metta and practicing reflections of metta when we're driving along or in our practice is really important. And if we find ourselves a lot of the time thinking about what we would like and more possessions or more whatever that we want, then really reflecting on gratitude and contentment and making that a daily practice, kind of counter whatever our predominant defilement is.
Thank you. Yes. So, suppose it's the last month of the rainy season in autumn when the crops grow closely together and a cowherd must take care of the cattle. He'd tap and poke them with his staff on the side and that to keep them in check. So I take this as lightly tapping, kind of like, I don't think he's flogging them. He's just kind of
That's ancient cowards.
well, yeah. Well, if you're looking at your own mind, I would recommend it's just like a gentle tapping, like not that way, not that way. I see myself like, do I really need to go there? No. Let's go this way instead. So then he'd poke with the staff on the side to keep them in check. Why is that? For he sees that if they were to wander into the crops, he could be executed, imprisoned, fined, or condemned. In the same way, I saw that unskillful qualities have the drawbacks of sordidness and corruption, and that skillful qualities have the benefit of cleansing power have the benefit and cleansing power of renunciation. Would you read that? Starting with the cowherd part.
Just as in the last month of the rainy season in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on the side, and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing.
It's really beautiful. So not only are we considering the danger, but we're also considering what we could benefit from with the wholesome states. Then, as I meditated, diligent, keen, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood. This thought of renunciation has arisen in me. It doesn't lead to hurting myself, hurting others, or hurting both. It nourishes wisdom. It's on the side of freedom from anguish, and it leads to extinguishment. If I were to keep on thinking and considering all night, all day and night, I see no danger that would come from that. Still, thinking and considering for too long would tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind is stressed. And when the mind is stressed, it's far from immersion. So I still settled, unified, and immersed my mind internally. Why is that? So that my mind would not be stressed. So this is interesting that this interrelationship between the body and the mind, the body actually becoming stressed, even from a lot of thinking of the wholesome. Is there much difference in that? In Bhante Bodhi's translation?
It uses the word strained rather than stressed. I kind of like that sense of strained in its multiple. Yeah, but otherwise, no.
So I settled, unified, and immersed my mind internally.
I I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why? So that my mind should not be strained.
Then, as I meditated, diligent, keen, and resolute, a thought of goodwill arose. A thought of harmlessness arose. So this is interesting that it's just these thoughts are rising rather than him intentionally bringing them up. So we can kind of see those thoughts or cultivate them intentionally, or in the absence of the harmful thoughts, these thoughts of goodwill, thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of harmlessness, or arising spontaneously. That's how it seems. Do you have anything to say about that?
Bhante Siddhasa uses the word disturbed, that the mind not be disturbed. And I also like that because it's a sense of like against the purity and stillness. These thoughts are rippling the mind.
This thought of harmlessness has arisen in me. It doesn't lead to hurting myself, hurting others, or hurting both. It nourishes wisdom. It's on the side of freedom from anguish. It leads to extinguishment. If I were to keep on thinking and considering all night, all day and night, I see no danger that would come from that. Still, thinking and considering for too long would tire my body. So I don't remember in Bhante Bodhisattva's idea of too long. How does he say, still thinking and considering for too long would tire my body? Too long.
I might tire my body when the body is tired. Let's see.
But what's the part of
excessive?
it? Excessive.
Excessive thinking.
Okay, excessive. Okay, excessive thinking. So a certain amount of it's good, but then if we're doing it excessively, and I think there's a difference between the thinking, considering, and then just the sense of goodwill or the sense of harmlessness. If we're cultivating metta, and there's just this pervasive feeling that's energetic rather than the intellectual thinking. It's just that depending how you consider vitakka. It's rethinking, reconsidering, pondering. So that's a really more of an intellectual activity, just kind of using the mind in a particular way. When the body is tired, the mind is stressed. So that's again, it's the mind, body. It's not really separate. Agitated, disturbed. Worn out and exhausted. Kilante. So why would the body get tired from thinking and pondering?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could talk about the neuroscience of it, but I think we just experience that. I mean, when I am overly thinking when I check into the body, a fatigue begins or a tightness begins, or it depends on the nature of the thoughts, what the response in the body is. But I have not noticed thinking without some sort of body resonance.
Right, thinking takes energy. When we study, we get exhausted, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Argentinizzo said there was some study, and that people that were doing physical work all day were less exhausted than people that were doing a lot of mental work. But then there are some people that get, I guess it's probably adrenaline, if they're excited about some project or something, and they'll stay up really late at night. So I don't know.
But there's still an impact on the body. It's like the mind-body connection in regards to thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I measure it in my body.
Uh-huh. So I stilled, settled, and unified and immersed my mind internally. Why is that? So that my mind would not be stressed. This word again. Agitated, disturbed, over aroused. That's interesting. And this ma is a negation. So not disturbed, over aroused, agitated, stressed. Whatever a mendicant frequently thinks about and considers becomes their heart's inclination. A hula is frequently or often, thinks about a lot, ponders frequently, and then relooks, reexamines. This is Dvedhāvitakkasutta again. True, actual. Okay, got that wrong. Actuality. Okay. Chaitaso has to do with the heart or mind. If they often think about and consider thoughts of renunciation, they've given up sensual thought to cultivate the thought of renunciation. Their mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. So we're replacing the unwholesome with the wholesome. And then we're giving space to the wholesome when we're considering the harm of the unwholesome. We're continuously abandoning these unwholesome activities of mind, which may have been habitual, and then it's like creating a new habit of mind, but it's intentional. It's not default. If they often think about and consider thoughts of goodwill, their mind inclines to thoughts of goodwill. If they often think about and consider thoughts of harmlessness, their mind inclines to thoughts of harmlessness. So
It's so similar, yeah.
Okay. Suppose it's the last month of summer when the crops have been gathered within a village and a cowherd must take care of the cattle. While at the root of a tree in the open, he only needs to be mindful that the cattle are there. In the same way, I needed only to be mindful that those things were there. Those mental formations, the wholesome thoughts, the wholesome mental formations.
Read the next sentence.
Would you, you want to, so you want to read it as a whole? Okay. My energy was roused up and unflagging. My mindfulness was established and lucid. My mind, my body was tranquil and undisturbed. My mind was immersed in samadhi.
So here's Bhikkhu Bodhi's. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops had been brought inside the villages, the cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So too, there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. Tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified. I just like the way that that simile of the cowherd leads to this, you know, it's a tirelessness because you're just at the root of the tree. You're arousing the right kind of mindfulness. It's not a draining. There's a tranquility that emerges.
And also, I just want to say about those two similes. They're also quite interesting because we all know when there's some strong defilement in the mind, we have to really, really guard it, be really, really careful, right? Like if we're really, really angry or whatever, yeah, we don't just leave our minds alone. There is a sense of poking and guarding and, you know, keeping our mind on the breath or on the body and really, really, really being vigilant. And so that's one way that sometimes we need to work with the mind. And of course, early in meditation as well, there is that needing to really bring back the mind again and again to the breath before, or to the object before we have established stability in the mind, especially in the early time of practice. That can be the case sometimes. But then also, sometimes we get into the habit of manipulating our mind a bit much and over managing it. But there are times when our mind is very peaceful, when we have a lot of love in our heart or good intentions. And during those times, we can just trust ourselves. We don't have to manage ourselves. So it's important that awareness is still there, but that awareness is very kind of spacious and very broad, and we don't have to kind of manipulate and manage and poke at the mind. And so it's important to like make that shift. And yeah, also as well as being very vigilant and very careful with our minds and manipulating our minds. Also these other times when we really don't have to. Either just in our daily life, you know, where we're aware there's wholesome factors in our mind, where we're interacting in a way that's wise, then that's fine. And we can just relax. Or in our practice, once the practice gets a certain amount of momentum, there's not much we have to do. Just be with the metta that's just being generated automatically, or just stay with the quietness in the mind, or whatever. So those two modes are quite important.
Thank you. I just highlighted the word Dhamma because Bhante Sujato translated Dhamma as things, and then Bhante Bodhi translated as states.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it can take either meaning, translated, but the states, like you're talking, is more like a mental state rather than the thoughts, all the discursive thinking and saying, oh, how wonderful it is to have loving kindness in my heart or something like that. It's just it's just there, the state of metta or the state of peacefulness, or the mind, just seeing the factors in the mind, just seeing how they're naturally unfolding rather than really that, like you were saying, all that poking and prodding. That's sometimes necessary when we're heading towards unwholesome, the unwholesomeness.
mental states.
May I read Fante Bodhi's abbreviated version of the jhanas and the knowledges so that we have time to get to the deer simile?
Certainly. Okay,
Because
certainly.
he's got it nicely
All right.
compact. Because it appears in so many suttas. We'll cover it many other times. So quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhana. And through the jhanas and
Well, why
knowledges.
can we just read the?
That's the .
Oh,
I
okay.
directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This was the third true knowledge. She's gone through the jhanas and the knowledges.
But it would be good. This isn't so long. I think we do have time. We could just read through it quickly.
All right, excellent.
Okay. Because we don't want to skip over the jhanas. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, I entered and remained in the first absorption, which has rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. As the placing of the mind and keeping it connected were settled, I entered and remained in the second absorption, which has rapture and bliss born of immersion, with internal clarity and mind at one, without placing the mind and keeping it connected. And with the fading away of rapture, I entered and remained in the third absorption, where I meditated with equanimity, mindful and aware, personally experiencing the bliss of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, one meditates in bliss. With the giving up of pleasure and pain, and with the ending of the former happiness and sadness, I entered and remained in the fourth absorption without pleasure or pain, with pure equanimity and mindfulness. When my mind had immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, I entered it towards the recollection of past lives. And as the recollection of past lives is described. And this was the first knowledge. The first night, ignorance was destroyed and knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed, light arose. As happens for a meditator who is diligent, keen, and resolute. And he had the knowledge of the death and rebirth of sentient beings. This is knowledge of their karma. And that was the second knowledge. Ignorance was destroyed and light emerged. And then the last, when the mind became immersed in samadhi like this, extended to knowledge of the ending of defilements, truly understood, and the knowledge that the defilements have been completely destroyed. He truly understood this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. Truly understood the defilements. These are the defilements, these are the origin of the defilements, this is the cessation of the defilements. This is the practice that leads to the cessation of the defilements. And that's the third knowledge. Knowing and seeing like this, my mind was freed from defilement, sensuality, desire to be reborn, and ignorance. And then he knew that he had done what needed to be done, that birth was destroyed. And that was a third knowledge. Ignorance was destroyed. So that's a summary. I summarized it somewhat, but I think we needed to go through the jhanas
Excellent.
before we get to the simile. Because this is a thing, you know, this whole progression. I think Bhante Sujato has a really good way of translating this progression through the jhanas and how it's this gradual letting go, even of the most sublime states, and then a knowledge is able to arise. So, you wanted to read the simile of the.
Go ahead. I mean, I just wanted us to be able to get to it.
Yeah, we
time-wise.
have 9 minutes. You can read the Bhante Bodhis.
All right, go to that one. Suppose there is a wooded range there, that in a wooded range there was a great low-lying marsh near which a large herd of deer lived. Then a man appeared desiring their ruin, harm, bondage, and he closed off the safe and good path to be traveled joyfully, and he opened up a false path. And he put out a decoy and set up a dummy so that the large herd of deer might later come down upon calamity, disaster, and loss. But another man came desiring their good, welfare, and protection. And he reopened the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he closed off the false path. And he removed the decoy and destroyed the dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come to growth, increase, and fulfillment. I'm going to continue with what each of those images is.
Sure.
I have given this simile in order to convey a meaning. This is the meaning. The great low-lying marsh is a term for sensual pleasures. The large herd of deer is a term for beings. The man desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage is a term for Mara, the evil one. The false path is a term for the wrong eightfold path. That is wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. The decoy is a term for delight and lust. The dummy is a term for ignorance. The man desiring their good, welfare, and protection is a term for the Tathagata, accomplished and fully enlightened. The safe and good path is to be traveled joyfully, is a term for the Noble Eightfold Path. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So the safe and good path is to be traveled joyfully, has been reopened by me. The wrong path has been closed off, the decoy removed, and the dummy destroyed.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So this particular sutta is focusing on the second of the Noble Eightfold Path, the Samma Kamanta, the right thought or right intention to abandon the unwholesome and to cultivate the wholesome. But they all work together, not separate. Is there anything else we'd like to add?
Well, I think this simile is extremely rich. Yeah, I think probably we could do a whole session on just the simile. There's another sutta, I think it's the Tisa Sutta, where he talks about you go out and you're not sure of the path, and so you ask directions. And the person says, okay, you take the right road, you go through the forest, you go through the marsh, you go through. And it's similar to this. Those could be nicely done together. But for me, the whole point, I just see such a beautiful thing here of the Buddha going out into the world. I imagine us going out into the world today, and it's set up with decoys. It's set up with dummies. The whole advertising in this industry is a decoy. The whole structure of our society, no, I won't say the whole structure. The the consumeristic way of relating. Some of our ideals are based on lust, some of our, within society. So these false directions, the path, the markers, it's this whole world of Mara, that samsara we're in. And so what the Buddha is giving us is something very unique to our kind of being dear in this park that we didn't know had a different way of being.
So getting back to the beginning of the sutta, when we see what's arising, it's not like we're saying, rather just, well, it can be during meditation where we were out at the shopping mall and then we're sitting in our cushion and then we start visualizing all these things that were on display, and then see desire arising for some object that's in our mind that's implanted there. So so then you can see the harm that we're just being kind of driven by these desires or not. And then if we just say, okay, that this is not helpful, just to be obsessing about something that I don't really need even, but this idea, this decoy or whatever is planted in my mind, and I think it's safe because everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is running up their credit card and just distracting themselves with whatever it is that desirable in the world, or kind of made to appear to be a desirable thing. So that's just the beauty of being able to just stop, even if we're in the shopping mall and we just stop in our tracks and close our eyes for a minute and think, do I really need to be driven into that store and purchase something that I don't need just because it looks flashy and wonderful?
Well, the drive dissipates. So before monastic life, there would be times where I would go with a friend window shopping or whatnot. And there would be certain outfits or home decor or whatever that had an attraction to it for me. And, perhaps they get purchased or tried on or at least thought about, and the energy into that. And I remember, I don't know if it might have been an Anagarika, might have been a novice, I think Anagarika. And we were on Alms Round and we passed by stores with things in the windows. And I could feel a little bit of that habitual pull, like, oh, yeah, I would have worn that, or, oh, yeah, that kind of thing. And after a while, it was just more, oh, there's color, there's the form. There was not the attraction, there was not the pull. And at some point, there was even, like I go out now and it's like, why do we have so many options in regards to attire and home decor and whatnot? It's like, what is this feeding? And what is it depleting? So the renunciation has brought up much more joy in me.
There's a lot of people in the world who haven't taken on robes, but they are moving more and more to simplicity and just they're calling downsizing their lives. So, and then it lends to a more peaceful state of mind because we're not always chasing after things. So we're seeing the harm in greed if you're a greed type, and seeing the harm in hatred and anger if you're a hatred type. And few of us, I think, are prone to cruelty. I'd like to think that, but there's a cruel element in our hearts that we need to be aware of. So this is just to observe what's going on in the mind and letting go of the unwholesome or the harmful or the unskillful, and developing the skillful. And it leads to liberation. This is what the sutta is pointing to, that with freedom from this bondage, or freedom from being trapped by Mara.
Yeah.
So
do the last paragraph.
So okay.
This is Bhante Sujato's. Out of sympathy, I've done what a teacher should do who wants what's best for their disciples. Here are the roots of trees, and here are these empty huts. Practice absorption. Don't be negligent. Don't regret it later. This is my instruction to you. That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied. We all approved what the Buddha said.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Thank you, Adimutta Murti, for her input. Adimutta has been here for a few days and from New Zealand.
Well, we don't have time on the recording. I'd sure like to hear your take on the last similes at some point.
Much to say about them.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, let's see.